All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be listening to this. I'm going to apologize in advance for any sneezing that might occur. Apparently, the weather has decided to affect me, and I have really bad allergies, so forgive me in advance. So we'll move on and listen to our textbook author. Make sure the volume's up before we start. Oh, that turns it off. Okay.
During the first half of the 19th century, the debate between those promoting states' rights or regional interests and those promoting nationalism and the growth of the United States as an international power centered on an array of issues focused on the economy. Henry Clay from Kentucky, who became one of the most powerful congressmen in history, both in the House of Representatives as Speaker of the House and also as a senator. He promoted what was called the American system. And the American system, in his view, was designed to create a powerful international economy comparable to that of Great Britain. And to do so, the American system focused on three issues. It promoted a national bank, so as to create a national currency and a national economy. It also promoted a tariff designed to tax imported goods from Europe and allow the young American industrial sector to succeed against foreign competition. And then the third aspect of the American system, the third leg of the stool, was the promotion of the United States government, the federal government, contributing to the expense of what were called internal improvements, new roads, new canals, new harbors, all designed to improve the circulation of the national economy. So Henry Clay, a Kentuckian, a slaveholder, was the foremost proponent of the American system whereby nationalism was integrated into economic policy.
Alrighty. So, if you recall, Jefferson has his embargo that starts in 1807, and between that and the War of 1812, kind of forces Americans to start looking inward for their production of their finished goods. They couldn't really look to Britain because, A, we've just fought a war to get rid of them. Now we're fighting them in another war in 1812. So we have to start trying to figure out things on our own. So this is going to lead to our first industrial revolution and our surge of economic growth in the early 1800s. The charter for the first Bank of the United States ended in 1811, so that's what Hamilton set up. It was not immediately renewed. Without the financial control that the central bank represented, economic turmoil ensued. To stabilize the economy, a second bank was chartered, which would last for 20 years. So the second bank of the United States. And I think that was in Pennsylvania, if I'm correct. I might be wrong. Don't quote me. So to protect the fledgling American industrial sector from competing British imports, the Tariff of 1816 was enacted. And so remember, a tariff is on imports and exports. And so this is one of our first protective tariffs. All right, the North, where most of the manufacturing base was located, was all for it. The South is against it, because that means that the people manufacturing the foreign goods are less likely to buy the products or the raw materials from the South, and that's how they're making their money. The agrarian economy of the South still depends on the shipping goods abroad to agents who in turn sold them, and then purchased items requested by the owners and shipped them back. Southerners were upset because they were forced to pay this tax. So it was put in place to protect the industry. However, it has a backlash for the southern states. Excuse me. Sorry. The War of 1812 had highlighted several shortcomings of the United States. One of them was that we had a very poor transportation system. So it does point out the need for improvements there. This is deck life on the Paragon, 1811 to 1812. The Paragon was a floating town. It was the third steamboat operated on the Hudson River by Robert Fulton and Robert R. Livingston. So, anyway. Okay, so While John Marshall was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, he extended the powers of the Supreme Court to provide a more nationalist role of the federal government in state affairs. There's another landmark case called Dartmouth College versus Woodward. Marshall decides to remove the power of the state to modify contracts at will. So, let's see, the other court, there's a couple more. The relationship between the state and federal government is forever changed when Marshall delivered his ruling in McCulloch versus Maryland in 1819. The case involved the right of the national government to create a bank, which was not specifically mentioned in the Constitution as a power given to Congress. Marshall ruled that a clause in Article 1, Section 8 was purposely left vague to allow Congress to create necessary and proper entities. So McCulloch versus Maryland pulls up the necessary and proper clause. Gibbons versus Ogden in 1824. Marshall exerts the right of the nation to regulate commerce over the right of the states. So we can regulate trade despite what the states have to say. This is John Marshall, Chief Justice and pillar of judicial nationalism. That's what it says here. Pillar of judicial. Doesn't he look like a pillar? All right. Anyway. So we move on to the American system. So you have a lot of internal improvements. You have the creation of industrial infrastructure and the stabilizing of the American economy following the War of 1812. And this is what's described as the American system. They also called for a more active role of the federal government in the lives of its citizens. The first proponent of the American system was Henry Clay, which our textbook author just told us. All right. So because of the demise of the Federalist Party, so remember that kind of goes away, only the Democratic Republicans remain as a visible party. The party of one-party rule was considered an era of good feelings. Well, that would make sense. We talked to the Virginia dynasty before. So Monroe is going to continue that. He follows Madison to become another citizen of Virginia to be elected. So Jefferson, Madison, Monroe. All from Virginia, so part of the Virginia dynasty. Monroe had served as Secretary of State and Secretary of War to Madison, so he is somewhat experienced. The Panic of 1819 is ignited by a collapse in cotton prices, and it was the new republic's first economic depression. You also have a lot of banking practices that cause this and problems with the banking system that are going to contribute to the Panic of 1819. This is James Monroe in 1817 as he enters the presidency. I wonder if the presidency aged these guys like it does our presidents. If you've ever seen Obama 8 years ago and Obama today, lots of new gray hairs. But, they're portraits, so maybe they painted them out. Who knows? All right. So one of the big issues is the Missouri Compromise. So after the Revolution, the United States have followed an alternating pattern of admitting states in the Union. One slave state, one free state. At the time of Missouri's request to be admitted, there were 22 states, 11 free, 11 slave. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 had dictated there would be no slave states there, because Missouri is in that area. But no such... Missouri is not in that area, but that does define that. No such policy existed for states to emerge from the Louisiana Purchase. Eventually, the state was admitted, and an agreement was reached that no more slave states would come from the area above the parallel of 3630. And part of that also has to do with Maine. So Maine is admitted as a free state, and then they allow Missouri to be admitted as a slave state. So you then are 12 and 12. But you have the Missouri Compromise line, which is going to create a strict division of our country. And it will cause problems later. Texas falls below the Missouri Compromise line. It does become a slave state when it joins the Union. So the Missouri Compromise line is actually below the state of Missouri. So it is right here. This is the Missouri 3630. All right. You have your free states, you have your slave states, and you have things that will be covered by the compromise. 1818, 1819, some boundary treaties. 42nd parallel for the Spanish possessions. The Adams-Onis treaty line is going to be around here. So about what Spain controls. And this is when we get Florida from Spain is in 1819. All right. So now we have all of this. Our Louisiana Purchase area. We've picked up Florida from Spain. So we have quite a bit of land now. All right. So after the end of the War of 1812, the United States will never fight a war with Great Britain again. We fight as allies in future wars. In fact, over time, two nations would grow close to one another through diplomatic means. One of the first steps in this process was the Rush-Bagot Treaty of 1817. This is going to end the naval arms race on the Great Lakes. Both sides agreed to limit the number of warships on the inland seas. The next effort was the Convention of 1818, which settled the northern limit of the Louisiana Territory at the 49th parallel. So that is going to be here, the Convention of 1818, 49th parallel. All right, and that still exists today. The United States now stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the Rocky Mountains, with only Spanish America keeping it from straddling the continent. And that will come soon. However, Spain still controls the territory of Florida, a narrow bit of land from its panhandle to the Mississippi River. So this area was a lawless zone that bandits and Indians would use as headquarters for pursuers from America legally could not follow. All right. So basically that's where people went to hole up if they were criminals. To combat Seminoles on the Florida border, Jackson was dispatched with 2,000 troops. He discovered 2 British spies, summarily executed them, and continued to pursue the Seminoles into Florida. At the same time, Secretary of State John Quincy Adams was negotiating with Spain to purchase the territory, so he used Jackson's exploit to strengthen his hand in obtaining Florida and establishing the western border of Louisiana. So that's how we get Florida. Continuing his diplomatic success on land issues, in 1824, Adams completes a treaty with Russia that defined the Oregon Territory's southern boundary. So up here, Oregon Territory's southern boundary is going to be up there. All right. Let's see. During the French Revolution, Spain had ignored her Latin American colonies, and they had rebelled against the motherland. By 1823, when it becomes apparent that Europe was willing to go to war to retake these colonies, Monroe issues a statement known as the Monroe Doctrine. Makes sense? Monroe. It states that the New World was no longer open to colonization by Europe. The United States does not have the military power to back that up, though. Great Britain, however, who sides with the United States on this situation, does. And to be honest, it is really not utilized until many decades later. But it's pulled up in 1898 in particular with the Spanish-American War, so we'll get there. And later on, the Roosevelt corollary is added to it while Teddy Roosevelt's president. So the Monroe Doctrine is put into place. Basically, you leave us alone, mind your own business, we won't bother you, kind of thing. But like I said, it's not really utilized until much later. Let's see. The Massacre of the Whites by Indian and Blacks in Florida in 1836. So this is published in a Southerner's account of the Seminole War. It's one of the earliest known depictions of African Americans and Native Americans fighting as allies. So, because if you're both running away, you band together. Oh, presidential nominations and corrupt, all on the same side. I can't even imagine. So, in the election of 1824, there are no political parties to contend against. You only have the Democratic Republicans. So they turn on themselves and they run 4 candidates for the presidency. The election results in no one winning an electoral majority, and the election was thrown into the House of Representatives. So now this is the second time this has happened, because remember this happened during Jefferson's election as well. Once the election was thrown into the House, each state gets 1 vote, regardless of how their citizens voted. In the end, John Quincy Adams wins the presidency, though he had lost the popular vote and had come in second to Jackson on the electoral vote. He nominated his fellow candidate in 1824, Henry Clay, who was also the Speaker of the House, to be his Secretary of State. As most past presidents had served as Secretary of State, Jackson perceived this as a corrupt bargain. Basically, you're naming your successor. However, since we know history, or you will know history soon, Henry Clay never becomes president. Jackson, however, does. So start by the 2 whereby Clay would use his influence in the House to secure Adams the presidency, and Clay in turn would be made heir apparent. So, when he is nominating him as Secretary of State or whatever, they're saying, oh, you made this agreement beforehand. He's going to help you get the presidency, and then you're going to reward him. So that's the corrupt bargain. Imagine somebody in politics being corrupt. That's just crazy pants. All right. So as president, so remember John Quincy Adams is John Adams' son. He's been an ambassador. He's worked in the Secretary of State and all this other stuff. So he's well qualified to be the president at this point. Adams supports bold internal movements. Such a program, coupled with the unusualness of the 1824 election, results in the end of the era of good feelings and the emergence of a new party, the National Republicans. So we had the Democratic Republicans and the National Republicans. Almost from the moment the 1824 election ended in the decision by the House of Representatives, the 1828 election began. Jackson and his followers launched attacks on Adams' character, to which the president's supporters replied with equally blistering assaults. In the end, Jackson was elected to the presidency in 1828. John Quincy Adams, brilliant man, but an ineffective leader. So think back to his father and his father's term in office. The same could be said of him. All right, so this election of 1828. Andrew Jackson, Democratic Republican. 178 electoral votes, 647 of the popular vote. So you can see this is all Andrew Jackson. He is known in the South for his fighting in Florida, his fighting in New Orleans, the Battle of New Orleans at the end of the War of 1812. They know him. They love him. So he gets all of those votes there. And these are states with larger electoral votes. Virginia, a huge population at this time. North Carolina, South Carolina, pretty large populations. Ohio, Pennsylvania, all very large populations. So anyway, that is all we have to say today. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I will see you soon, and have a great rest of your day.